I transferred every cent I owned on a hunch that was far too kind compared to the brutal truth. 2 weeks later, my husband served me divorce papers with the arrogant smile of a man who thought he had already won. He had no idea I had flipped the board before he even made his opening move. Now I am going to make him wish he had never learned how to lie. My name is Claire Maddox, and at 34 years old, I had become an invisible woman in the gleaming, manicured city of Harbor Ridge. My husband, Dr. Ethan Klein, was the sun everyone orbited, especially tonight as he prepared for the medical gala that would cement his reputation as a god of cardiology. I stood before the hallway mirror, adjusting the clasp of a necklace that cost more than my father made in a year, and watched Ethan adjust his cufflinks behind me. He looked perfect. He looked like a savior. But for the past 3 weeks, I had been watching a monster shed its skin. The signs had been microscopic, the kind of things only a wife of 12 years would notice. It started with questions that felt too sharp for casual conversation. Ethan had developed a sudden, intense interest in our filing cabinet, a place he had ignored since his residency. One Tuesday, while knotting his silk tie, he asked for the combination to the wall safe, claiming he needed to store a vintage watch. Then came the dinner party where he introduced me to a potential investor not as his partner, but with a chilling slip of the tongue. "Claire is a stable asset in my life," he had said, laughing it off when the table went quiet. It made my skin crawl. I tried to dismiss it as stress, but the unease sat in my stomach like a stone. That stone turned into ice at a pre-gala cocktail hour last week. I was returning from the powder room when I heard his voice drifting from the terrace, hidden by the heavy velvet curtains. He was speaking to a senior partner, his tone dismissive and light. "Don't worry about the house. She'll sign. She always signs." I had frozen, my hand hovering over the curtain fabric. I walked away before I could hear the rest, forcing myself to breathe through the sudden constriction in my chest. But the final blow landed on a gray Wednesday morning. Ethan had rushed into the shower, leaving his laptop open on the marble island. The screen was dimming, but I saw the bold header of a draft email addressed to a law firm called Sterling and Associates. The subject line read, "Dissolution Strategy Klein." I did not scream. I did not throw the expensive espresso machine against the wall. Instead, I retrieved my old cracked smartphone from the junk drawer and photographed the screen, the file names, and the timestamps. My hands did not shake. I felt a cold, clinical clarity. We had been married for 12 years. I had suffocated my own career in interior brand design to support him through the hell of medical school and the poverty of residency. I remembered his vow from those days, spoken in our cramped studio apartment. "When we make it, Claire, you get everything." That promise was dead. Tonight, at the gala, Ethan stood on the podium, bathed in spotlight, holding his crystal award. He thanked his mentors. He thanked his administrative staff. He even made a charming joke about our golden retriever. He did not say my name. I stood in the shadows of the ballroom, clapping my hands together until they stung, smiling the plastic smile of a trophy wife. Inside, the last thread of affection snapped. I knew what I had to do. He thought I was the naive artist he married a decade ago, but he forgot that I managed our books when we had nothing. I would not wait for him to serve me papers and lock me out of our accounts. I was going to move the assets that were legally mine. I would do it quietly, cleanly, and without a single trace of emotion. I drove 45 minutes to the north side of the city, far away from the manicured suburbs of Harbor Ridge. The bank was a small credit union squeezed between a dry cleaner and a pawn shop. It was unpretentious and, most importantly, unconnected to the massive financial conglomerates Ethan preferred. I sat across from a loan officer with tired eyes and opened a business checking account for Maddox Studio, LLC. I set the mailing address to a rented post office box 3 towns over. This was the first wall of my fortress. That afternoon, I sat in a booth at a public library. shielded by stacks of books, and conducted a forensic audit of my own life. I had to be surgical. Our primary asset was the house on Elm Street, currently appraised at $1.2 million. Then there was the joint savings account, which held roughly $80,000. Ethan managed our investment portfolio, a tangle of stocks and mutual funds he claimed was too sophisticated for my understanding. But he had forgotten about the one thing he always sneered at: my freelance income. For years, I had designed brand identities for local boutiques. Ethan called it my little hobby. I called it $75,000 of liquid capital that he had never touched. I began the transfer. I did not move the money in a panic. A sudden withdrawal of $75,000 would trigger flags and perhaps even a phone call to the house. Instead, I moved it in jagged, uneven increments that mimicked business expenses. $4,200 to a vendor, $1,800 for equipment. I funneled the money into a revocable living trust I had established online, creating a legal barrier that would protect these funds as premarital and separate property. It was a terrifyingly slow process, a digital sleight of hand performed while my heart hammered against my ribs. 2 days later, I met Maren Holt. She was a lawyer recommended by a forum for divorced women, known for being ruthless and entirely off the grid. We met at the back of a dim coffee shop in the industrial district, a place with no security cameras and thick, greasy air. Maren did not shake my hand. She wore a sharp gray suit that looked like armor. We did not speak about the weather. I slid a printout of Ethan's recent bank activity across the scratched table. She read it, then pulled a small notepad from her purse. She wrote quickly, tore off the page, and slid it to me. He is positioning himself. This is not just a divorce, it is an extraction. I looked up at her, feeling the blood drain from my face. "What do I do?" I whispered. Maren took the pen again. "Watch for the signature traps. He needs your consent to leverage the house or restructure debt. Do not sign anything, not a tax form, not a birthday card." She took the paper back, struck a match, and held it to the corner of the note. We watched it curl into black ash in the empty ashtray. "Go home," Maren said, her voice low and gravelly. "Be the perfect wife. Make him believe you are blind." I returned to the house that felt less like a home and more like a crime scene. I put on my mask. I ironed Ethan's white lab coats until the steam clouded the windows. I prepared a roast chicken with rosemary, exactly how he liked it. When he walked through the door, tossing his keys onto the counter with the arrogance of a man who owned the world, I greeted him with a soft smile. "How was the hospital?" I asked, taking his coat. "Exhausting." He sighed, not meeting my eyes. "The board is pushing for that new research grant. I might be late again tomorrow." "I understand. Ethan, you work so hard for us." He patted my cheek, a gesture that felt patronizing and cold, before heading upstairs to shower. I waited until I heard the water running. The noise of the pipes was my cover. I slipped into his study, my socks silent on the hardwood floor. I did not go for the computer this time. I went to his leather briefcase, which he had left unlatched on the armchair. I shuffled through patient files and medical journals until I found a thin blue folder at the bottom. I opened it and felt the air leave my lungs. It was a loan document for a home equity line of credit, secured against our house for $200,000. The date was from 3 days ago. My eyes scanned to the signature line at the bottom. There, next to Ethan's sharp scrawl, was my name, Claire Maddox. It was looped perfectly. The slant was identical to mine. It looked exactly like my signature. But I had never seen this paper before in my life. He had forged my name to mortgage our future, likely to fund his new life with someone else. I closed the folder with trembling hands, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. He wasn't just leaving me, he was stealing the ground from beneath my feet. The gala ended in a blur of camera flashes and forced applause. As the valet brought our car around, Ethan checked his phone with a theatrical frown. He told me there was an emergency with a patient files transfer at the hospital and that he had to go handle it personally. It was a clumsy lie, the kind a man tells when he stops caring if you believe him. I took a separate cab home, watching the rain streak against the window, feeling the weight of the forged loan document in my mind like a physical bruise. The house was dark when I unlocked the front door, but it was not silent. I stood in the foyer, dripping water onto the hardwood, and heard it, a sound that sliced through the quiet of the hallway. It was a laugh. High, breathless, and distinctly female. It drifted down from the master bedroom, the sanctuary I had decorated with my own hands. My heart did not race. It stopped. I walked up the stairs, my heels sinking into the carpet, making no sound. The door to our bedroom was ajar. I pushed it open. Ethan was there, standing by the window, shirt unbuttoned, but my eyes locked on the woman sitting on the edge of our bed. She was wearing a silk red dress that looked like a wound against the cream sheets. Sloan Mercer, the pharmaceutical representative who had shaken my hand at 3 different fundraisers this year, always complimenting my earrings while her eyes lingered on my husband. She did not jump. She did not cover herself. She looked up at me, smoothed the fabric over her thigh, and smiled. It was the smile of a predator looking at a wounded animal. "You're still here?" she asked, her voice dripping with boredom. "I thought you would have left by now." I looked at Ethan. I expected shame. I expected panic. Instead, he looked relieved. He turned to me, his face composed, almost professional. "This makes things easier, Claire," he said, his voice terrifyingly steady. "We don't have to pretend anymore. I need someone who understands my ambition. You've just been existing in my shadow." He was not afraid of getting caught. He was waiting for it. He wanted to provoke a scene, to make me scream and throw things so he could paint me as the hysterical wife in court. I refused to give him that footage. I turned around, walked into the guest room, and threw clothes into a suitcase. My hands moved with mechanical precision. I zipped the bag, walked past their open door without looking back, and marched out into the storm. The rain was freezing. It soaked through my dress in seconds, plastering my hair to my face. I dragged my suitcase down the driveway, blinded by tears and rage, intending to drive until I ran out of gas. Suddenly, high-intensity headlights cut through the darkness, blinding me. A massive black car slid silently across the bottom of the driveway, blocking my exit. I stopped, gripping the handle of my suitcase. The rear window of the car rolled down. A man sat inside, his face illuminated by the soft glow of the dashboard. It was Victor Hale. I recognized him immediately. He was a titan in the tech industry and, more importantly, he was Sloan Mercer's husband. He did not offer me a ride. He did not look sympathetic. He looked like a general surveying a battlefield. He opened the door and stepped out into the rain, holding a large umbrella, but he did not offer to share it. He reached into his coat and extended a thick, sealed envelope toward me. "Don't divorce him," Victor said. His voice was low, cutting through the sound of the rain. "Not tonight. Not yet. Get out of my way," I snapped, shivering violently. "Your wife is in my bed." "I know," Victor replied, his expression unchanging. "And my money is in your husband's offshore accounts. They aren't just sleeping together, Mrs. Maddox. They are running ghost medical projects through my company's philanthropic arm. They are siphoning millions. If you leave now, they win. They claim irreconcilable differences, split the assets, and vanish with the stolen capital." I stared at him, the water running down my face. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I need time. My forensic accountants need 4 weeks to trace the shell companies and secure a criminal indictment. I need them to feel safe. I need them to think they got away with it." He pressed the envelope into my freezing hand. It was heavy. "There is $50,000 in cash inside," Victor said. "Consider it a retainer." I will pay you another $250,000 when the handcuffs go on, but you have to go back inside. You have to apologize. You have to play the role of the desperate, forgiving wife who wants to save her marriage." "You want me to live with them?" I asked, my voice trembling with disgust. "You want me to watch Victor?" Looked at the lit window of the master bedroom, his eyes dark and empty. "I want you to help me destroy them," he said. "Go back in there. Cry, beg, buy us time, and when the moment comes, you will have the front row seat to their execution." I walked back into the house, the water from my clothes pooling on the expensive foyer rug. Ethan was standing exactly where I had left him, buttoning his shirt with shaking hands, while Sloane was gone. He looked up, expecting a lawyer or a police officer, but when he saw me, his shoulders dropped in visible relief. He thought I was weak. He thought I had returned because I was too terrified to face the world without his name attached to mine. "I am not leaving," I said, my voice trembling with a practiced fragility. I can't just throw 12 years away." "But there are rules." Ethan stepped forward, his face arranging itself into a mask of repentant husband. "Anything, Claire," he said, reaching for my hand. "I'll do anything to fix this." "You sleep in the guest room," I listed, pulling my hand away as if in pain. "We go to marriage counseling twice a week, and total transparency. I want to see the accounts." It was the perfect bait. By demanding transparency, I made him believe I was still ignorant of what he was actually doing. He agreed to everything with a solemn nod, hiding the triumphant glint in his eyes. He thought he had bought himself time to finish his exit strategy. He did not know he had just invited a spy into his war room. The next day, a courier delivered a sealed package to me at the grocery store. Inside was a cheap, prepaid flip phone from Victor's lawyer. I hid it inside a box of tampons in the bathroom cabinet, the one place I knew Ethan would never look. That night, I started my log. Tuesday, 7:45 p.m. Ethan returns home. Smells of rain and expensive scotch. Says he was at a board meeting. I checked the hospital schedule. The board does not meet on Tuesdays. I became a ghost in my own marriage. I cooked his meals. I washed his clothes, checking pockets for receipts before tossing them in the machine. I played the part of the wounded, hopeful wife so well that I sometimes scared myself. Our first therapy session was a masterclass in manipulation. We sat on a beige couch in a quiet office downtown. Ethan held my hand, his thumb stroking my knuckles with a tenderness that made my stomach turn. I feel so guilty." Ethan told the therapist, looking down at the floor. "The pressure at the hospital has been crushing. I made a mistake, but I worry about Claire. She's been so volatile lately. I'm afraid she's losing her grip on reality." I felt the air shift in the room. I looked up, eyes wide and watery. "I just want us to be okay," I whispered, wiping a tear. "I'm trying so hard to forgive." The therapist looked at me with pity, but she wrote something in her notebook. Volatile. Ethan wasn't here to save our marriage. He was here to build a clinical paper trail. He wanted a professional diagnosis of emotional instability to present to a judge. If he could prove I was mentally unfit, he could fight for power of attorney or a larger share of the estate. He was trying to gaslight me into a straitjacket. When we got home, I went to the bathroom and texted Victor on the burner phone. He is building a case for my insanity. I need the financial link now. Victor sent the documents the next morning via an encrypted email I accessed at the public library. The file was complex, a maze of shell companies and offshore transfers, but the pattern was undeniable. Victor's company paid a vendor called Apex Medical Solutions for consulting fees. Apex Medical Solutions had no employees and a registered address in a strip mall in Delaware. From there, the money flowed into a private account in the Cayman Islands. The name on the signatory line for the Cayman account was not Ethan's, it was a holding company. But the secondary authorization signature belonged to a man named Elias Vane. I stared at the screen. Elias Vane was Ethan's middle name and his mother's maiden name. It clicked into place like the chamber of a gun. This was not a crime of passion. Ethan had not fallen in love with Sloane Mercer and made a mistake. They were partners in a massive embezzlement scheme. Ethan was authorizing fake medical trials at his hospital to justify the payments from Victor's company, and Sloane was approving the invoices. I closed the laptop, my hands cold. I wasn't just fighting a cheating husband. I was living with a felon who was methodically planning to frame me or destroy me to keep his freedom. I went home and made a pot of tea. When Ethan walked in, I asked him how his day was. Long, he said, kissing my forehead. But I'm doing it for us. Claire. I'm working on a big project that will set us up for life. I know you are, I said, smiling at him over the rim of my cup. I trust you completely. I was standing in the produce aisle of the local supermarket, weighing a bag of gala apples, when a man in a faded baseball cap brushed past me. He did not apologize. Instead, he dropped a small metallic disc into my open purse and muttered without looking at me. 60 seconds. It needs physical contact with the charging port. Do it tonight. He vanished around a display of oranges before I could blink. My heart hammered against my ribs as I finished my shopping, the small device burning a hole in my bag. It looked like a harmless flash drive, but I knew it was a weapon. That night, the silence in our bedroom felt heavy and suffocating. Ethan was asleep, his breathing deep and rhythmic, the sleep of a man with no conscience. His phone sat on the nightstand, charging, just inches from his hand. I lay awake until the digital clock read 2 a.m. I slipped out of the covers, my movements slow and agonizingly precise. I reached out, unplugged his charger, and inserted the investigator's device. The screen lit up. A small progress bar appeared. 10%, 20%. Ethan shifted in his sleep, mumbling something incoherent, and I froze, my hand hovering over the phone like a thief. If he woke up now, there would be no explanation. I would be done. Come on. I breathed silently, watching the bar crawl. 90%. Complete. I yanked the device out, plugged his charger back in, and slid the disc into the pocket of my pajama pants. I did not sleep for the rest of the night. The next morning, on my way to the gym, I dropped the device into the book return slot of the public library as instructed. It was a secret ritual, a transfer of evidence in a war my husband did not even know he was fighting. 2 days later, I accessed the decrypted data through a secure server Victor had set up for me. Reading the messages between Ethan and Sloane was like swallowing broken glass. They did not just talk about love or sex. They talked about me as if I were a piece of furniture they needed to discard. She is such a drag, Sloane had texted. Every time she looks at you with those sad puppy eyes, I want to scream. Patience, Ethan had replied. 2 more weeks. We get her to sign the post-nup. We secure the transfers, and then we fly. She will be a distant memory while we are sipping rum in a place where the extradition treaties don't reach. They were planning to run. They had chosen a country with loose laws and expensive villas, intending to live like royalty on stolen money. But the betrayal went deeper than just running away. I found a draft email in Ethan's sent folder addressed to a senior loan officer at his bank. Attached is the power of attorney form, signed by my wife. Claire Maddox, please increase the credit limit on our joint equity line by $300,000 immediately. We have home renovation starting Monday. I opened the attachment. It was a document granting Ethan full legal authority over my financial decisions, signed with a signature that looked exactly like mine. I had never seen this paper. He was not just divorcing me. He was loading me with debt before he vanished. I met Victor in a crowded park, sitting on a bench while watching ducks fight over bread crusts. I told him about the power of attorney. It fits, Victor said, his voice hard as granite. My forensic team traced the pattern. Sloane sets up a ghost vendor, a fake consulting firm, or a medical supply company. Ethan validates the invoices at the hospital, claiming the goods were received or the services rendered. The hospital pays the vendor. The vendor pays them. They are bleeding my company and the hospital dry. He wasn't scared, I realized aloud, the wind biting at my cheeks. When I caught him in the bedroom, he wasn't scared because the affair isn't the point. I am just a liability he needs to manage until the bank accounts are full. Exactly, Victor said. You are a distraction, and distractions get removed. I went home that evening with a cold resolve settling in my bones. I needed to see how far he had gone. While Ethan was in the shower, I logged into the cloud account where we kept our digital records. I navigated to the insurance folder. He had always made a big show of having a $2 million life insurance policy with me as the sole beneficiary, promising I would be taken care of if anything happened to him. I opened the latest policy update, dated just 4 days ago. The beneficiary field had been changed. It no longer said Claire Maddox. It read the S. Mercer Trust. I stared at the screen, my hand covering my mouth to stifle a sob that was more shock than sadness. If Ethan died, I got nothing. But if I died, I realized with a jolt of terror that I needed to check my own policies. I was living with a man who had already erased me from his future. He had metaphorically killed me on paper weeks ago. Now he was just waiting for the logistics to catch up. The bathroom mirror was no longer a place where I examined my red, puffy eyes. It had become a station for war paint. I stopped crying in the shower. I stopped staring at the ceiling at 3 a.m, wondering where I went wrong. Instead, I resurrected the woman Ethan thought he had buried. I reactivated the business license for Maddox Studio, taking on small branding gigs for local furniture showrooms. It was not just about the money. It was about remembering that I had value outside of being Dr. Klein's wife. I reached out to Nora Winslow, an old friend from design school who now ran one of the most successful agencies in the city. We met for lunch, and when I told her I was looking for work, she did not ask pitying questions. She slid a portfolio across the table. I have a boutique hotel project downtown, Nora said, tapping the leather cover. I need a lead on the branding identity. I need your eye. Claire, it is chaotic right now, and you were always the organized one. I'll take it, I said, feeling a spark of genuine excitement for the first time in years. When I told Ethan over dinner that I was consulting for a project, he didn't even look up from his phone. He cut his steak with surgical precision and let out a short, dismissive laugh. You are playing with decorations again, he asked, a smirk touching his lips. Well, if it keeps you busy while I'm at the hospital, I suppose it's harmless. Just don't let the house fall apart. It's just a small thing. Ethan, I replied, keeping my voice soft and submissive. I won't let it distract me from my duties here. I fed his ego because it made him careless. While he thought I was picking out fabric swatches, I was meeting Victor Hale in the most public places imaginable. We met at art galleries, standing side by side, staring at abstract paintings like two strangers discussing brushstrokes. We met in hotel lobbies, sitting in high-backed chairs that faced away from each other. I have hidden the internal investigation from my own chief financial officer, Victor murmured one afternoon, his eyes fixed on a sculpture of twisted metal. If Sloane catches wind that I am looking into the books, she will destroy the evidence before we can download it. But we are running out of time. The annual audit begins in 12 days. I can feel him getting restless, I whispered, pretending to check my watch. He is moving money faster. Stay the course, Victor said, standing up and walking away without looking at me. Don't break character. I learned to exist in the same room as Ethan without actually seeing him. I practiced a form of dissociation where he was just an object, a lamp or a table, rather than the man who was betraying me. I focused on my breathing. I focused on the end game. But as I sharpened my defenses, I began to notice that I was not the only one watching. It started with a dark sedan parked 3 houses down from ours. It was there on Tuesday night, and again on Thursday morning. Then, I saw a shadow lingering near the hedges by our driveway when I took the trash out. It was a man, dressed in dark clothing, who melted away as soon as the motion sensor lights flickered on. My first thought was that it was one of Victor's men, keeping guard, but the feeling in my gut was wrong. It felt predatory. I called Marin Holt from a payphone near Nora's office. "There is a car," I said, my voice tight. "Someone is watching the house. Is it Victor No?" Marin's voice came through the line, sharp and urgent. "Claire, listen to me. Ethan isn't just protecting his assets. He is going on the offensive. He has hired a private investigator. Why I asked, gripping the phone. He's the one cheating. He wants to flip the narrative," Marin explained. "He wants pictures of you with another man. He wants to prove that you are the unfaithful one so he can void the morality clause in your prenup and paint himself as the victim in court. If he catches you meeting Victor, even if it is innocent, he will use it to destroy you." I hung up the phone and stared at the busy street. Ethan was not just a liar, he was a tactician. He was trying to frame me for his own sins. I realized then that I had to be perfect. One slip, one wrong glance, one meeting with Victor that looked too intimate, and I would lose everything. The shift in the atmosphere at home was jarring. For the last 3 days, Ethan had transformed into a caricature of the perfect husband. He woke up early to make blueberry pancakes, filling the kitchen with a scent of vanilla that made my stomach turn. He brought home a diamond tennis bracelet wrapped in velvet, leaving it on my pillow with a note that said, "For a fresh start." He apologized for his long hours, blaming the hospital board, and touched my shoulder every time he passed me in the hallway. I knew exactly what he was doing. He was performing for an audience of one, the private investigator parked down the street, and creating a catalog of good husband behavior to present to a judge later. While Ethan played house, his accomplice grew impatient. My phone buzzed on Tuesday afternoon with an email from an anonymous address. I opened it to find a high-resolution photo of Ethan standing on the deck of a yacht, shirtless and laughing, holding a glass of champagne. The subject line was empty, but the body of the email contained a single line of text. "You can keep the house. Honey, just let him go." It was Sloane. She was taunting me, thinking I was clinging to a broken marriage out of pathetic desperation. She had no idea I was the one holding the door shut while the room filled with gas. I did not reply. I forwarded the email to Victor with a timestamp and the IP header, noting the time received. I deleted the message from my inbox and smiled at my reflection in the dark screen. That evening, Ethan made his move. He walked into the living room with a thick stack of documents, his expression casual, almost bored. "Claire, sweetheart," he said, sitting next to me on the sofa. "My accountant says we need to restructure some of our assets before the fiscal year ends. It is just a tax thing to lower our liability. I need you to sign these so we can file them by Friday." He placed the papers on the coffee table and handed me a pen. I don't understand legal talk very well," I said, my voice soft and hesitant. "Can I read it over tonight?" He stiffened. "It is standard boilerplate. Claire, you trust me, don't you?" "Of course," I said, widening my eyes. "But my dad always said to read before signing. I will do it tomorrow." I took the papers to Marin Holt the next morning. She scanned them in silence, her face hardening with every page she turned. When she looked up, her eyes were cold. "This is not a tax restructuring," Marin said. "This is a post-nuptial agreement disguised as an asset transfer. If you sign this, you are retroactively waiving your rights to the marital home and the investment portfolio in exchange for a one-time allowance of $20,000. He is trying to trick you into signing away your life." I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. He thought I was stupid. He thought he could hand me my own execution order and I would thank him for the pen. "We need him on record." I told Marin, "I need him to admit he is forcing me." I went back home and told Ethan I was ready to sign, but I wanted to do it over a celebration dinner at the Sovereign, a quiet, upscale restaurant downtown. I knew he would agree. He wanted this done. I texted Victor the time and table number. At 7 o'clock, we sat in a secluded booth. I knew Victor's investigator was at the table behind us, and likely another near the bar. Ethan ordered a bottle of wine that cost $300, pouring me a glass with a steady hand. He slid the document across the white tablecloth. "Here," he said, tapping the signature line. "Just right there." I picked up the pen, then let my hand hover. I looked at him, letting the silence stretch until it became uncomfortable. "Ethan," I said, my voice wavering intentionally. "I read some of this. It says I give up the house." Why would a tax form say that? Ethan's smile faltered. He looked around the room, then leaned in, his voice dropping to a hiss. "It is just legal language to protect the assets from liability. Claire, stop being difficult. We are doing this for our future. But it feels like I am losing everything," I said, putting the pen down. "I don't think I can sign this." The mask shattered. Ethan reached across the table and grabbed my wrist. His grip was painful, his eyes dark with a sudden ugly desperation. "You have to sign. Claire," he snarled, forgetting to whisper. "You have no idea what is at stake. The accounts are leveraged. I need this to clear the transfers. You don't understand what you owe me after all I have done for you." I looked at his hand on my wrist, then up into his eyes. I did not pull away. I let the investigator behind us capture every second of his aggression. For the first time in months, I dropped the act. My face went completely smooth, stripping away the fear and the confusion until there was nothing left but ice. "I owe you a signature," I said, my voice low and dangerously calm. "Or do you owe me a lifetime?" Ethan froze, sensing the shift. He looked at me as if seeing a stranger, his hand loosening on my wrist. But it was too late. The recording was already safe in the cloud. I sat in the passenger seat of Victor's armored SUV, parked in the shadow of a derelict warehouse by the docks. The rain hammered against the reinforced glass, sealing us in a capsule of gray noise. Victor did not look at me. He simply handed me a tablet with a grainy black and white video file queued up on the screen. "You need to see this," Victor said, his voice devoid of any warmth. "My team dug this up from the archives of a private security firm. It was part of a background check on Ethan from a decade ago that never got filed. I pressed play. The footage was timestamped 12 years ago. The location was unmistakably the Roasted Bean, the tiny, eclectic coffee shop near the design district where I used to spend my mornings. I saw the younger version of Ethan sitting at a corner table. He looked nervous, checking his watch, drumming his fingers on the wood. But he was not alone. A woman with severe features was sitting across from him, sliding a manila folder over the table. I watched, confused, as Ethan opened the folder. He pulled out photographs. He pulled out what looked like bank statements. And then he pulled out a photo that made my blood run cold. It was me. It was a picture of me walking my dog, taken from a distance. "This was recorded 3 weeks before you met him," Victor said softly. I felt the air leave the car. For 12 years, I had told the story of how we met. I had spilled my latte on his shirt, and he had laughed, charming and kind, and asked for my number instead of a dry cleaning bill. I thought it was fate. I thought it was the most romantic moment of my life. I watched the screen as the Ethan in the video nodded to the woman, memorizing the contents of the folder before sliding it into his bag. He was not waiting for destiny. He was studying a dossier. "He targeted you," Victor continued, taking the tablet back as my hands went numb. "He needed someone with a clean credit history, a modest inheritance, and a personality type that valued loyalty over suspicion. You were not a girlfriend, Claire. You were an investment strategy." Victor swiped the screen and showed me a recovered text log from that same month. The message was from Ethan to an unsaved number. Subject acquired. "She has potential. Stable family. Will believe anything if phrased romantically. Phase 1 begins Tuesday." The nausea hit me in a violent wave. My marriage, my memories, The life I had built, it was all a long con. Every "I love you" was a calculated move to keep the asset compliant. I stared out at the rain, expecting to shatter, but I didn't. Instead, something hard and jagged formed in the center of my chest. The sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, burning clarity. "If this is a game," I whispered, my voice sounding strange to my own ears, "then I am going to be the one who writes the ending." Victor nodded, approving of the shift in my eyes. "There is more," he said, leaning closer. "I am not just doing this for revenge. I have been coordinating with a federal financial crimes unit for 6 months. Ethan and Sloan have done this before, on a smaller scale. There are other victims, but this time, they got greedy." "What is the plan?" I asked. "Sloan has set up a fake medical startup called Next Gen Biologics," Victor explained. "She is preparing to invoice my company for a massive capital injection. $4 million. She thinks it is the final cash out before they run. If I block it, they get suspicious and flee. If I approve it, the wire fraud becomes a federal felony with a minimum sentence of 20 years. So we let them steal it." I realized. "We let them think they stole it," Victor corrected. "The moment the funds hit their offshore account, the trap snaps shut. But we are on a razor's edge. Claire, the transfer is scheduled for tomorrow morning. If Ethan senses anything, if you flinch. If you hesitate, they will abort the transfer and disappear tonight. You have to go back there and sleep next to him. You have to let him believe he has won." I looked at the dark outline of the warehouse, thinking of the man waiting for me at home, the man who had studied me like a lab rat before he even knew my name. "Don't worry about me," I said, opening the car door and stepping out into the cold wind. "I can act. I've been living a lie for 12 years. I just didn't know it was a script until today." The countdown had begun. I spent the morning coordinating a symphony of legal destruction. I messaged Marin Holt to confirm that the divorce petition, the emergency asset freeze order, and the fraud report to the FBI were all drafted and sitting on her desk. They were timed to be filed simultaneously the moment Victor gave the signal. It had to be precise. If one piece fell too early, Ethan would be alerted, and the money would vanish. I moved through the house like a phantom, scrubbing my existence from the filing cabinets. I took my passport, my birth certificate, and the hard drive containing my design portfolio. I moved them to a safety deposit box at a bank across town. I replaced them with photocopies and empty folders. When Ethan eventually broke open my personal safe, he would find nothing but dust. Ethan came home early, vibrating with a nervous energy that he tried to disguise as fatigue. He poured himself a drink and stood by the fireplace, watching me fold laundry. "We should just stop pretending," he said, swirling the ice in his glass. "We should liberate ourselves. Claire, a clean break. Public. Civil." His eyes did not look civil. They looked like the eyes of a wolf trying to coax a rabbit out of its hole. He wanted the divorce filed now so he could finalize the separation of assets before the stolen money hit his account. I folded a towel with slow, deliberate movements. I turned to him, softening my face into a mask of desperate hope. "Maybe we just need a break," I suggested, my voice trembling slightly. A trip. Just us. We could go up to the coast this weekend, to heal. Ethan's eyes lit up. It was exactly what he wanted. A trip meant I was distracted, away from my lawyers, and compliant. It also gave him the perfect cover to leave town with his bags packed. "That sounds perfect," he said, smiling too quickly. "I will book the tickets." My burner phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a single text from Victor. "She is coming in at 10 tomorrow to sign the investment agreement. Cameras are live. Do not miss." I knew I had one last card to play. I needed him to admit his intent on tape. I walked over to where he stood and placed a hand on his arm. "I will sign that restructuring paper you wanted," I said, feeling his muscles tense. "But I need to see the accounts first. All of them. Just so I know we are safe." Ethan hesitated. He looked at me, weighing the risk. He decided that my stupidity was a safe bet. He opened his laptop and logged into the banking portal, shielding the screen partially with his body. He showed me the joint account, but I saw the tab for the offshore trust open in the background. "See," he said, pointing to the screen. "Everything is fine." I leaned in, snapping a photo with the micro camera hidden in my sleeve, capturing the account numbers on the other tab. "I don't know, Ethan," I said, stepping back. "It looks complicated." He slammed the laptop shut. The charm vanished, replaced by the sneer of the man who had targeted me 12 years ago. "If you don't sign that paper tonight, Claire, you will end up with nothing. I am trying to protect you from your own incompetence." The recording app on my phone caught every syllable. "I will sign it in the morning," I whispered, looking down. "I promise." He nodded, satisfied that he had bullied me into submission one last time. He went to bed, dreaming of his new life. I stayed up, staring at myself in the hallway mirror. The woman looking back was not the sad, confused wife from 3 weeks ago. She was a witness. She was the prosecutor. And tomorrow, she would be the executioner. The morning of the explosion was quiet. I stood in the hallway, adjusting Ethan's silk tie with hands that did not tremble. He looked at me with a pitying sort of affection, believing this was the last day he would have to endure my presence before his grand escape. "Have a wonderful day," I said, forcing a smile that reached my eyes. "I will," Ethan replied. He kissed my cheek, a dry, dismissive peck that felt like a seal on a death warrant. He walked out the door, whistling, convinced he was the author of this story. He had no idea he was walking into the final chapter I had written for him. At 10 o'clock, the dominoes began to fall. In the glass-walled conference room of Victor's high-rise, Sloane Mercer sat with a pen in her hand. She signed the investment agreement for her fake startup, Next Gen Biologics, believing she was seconds away from securing $4 million. She watched the wire transfer confirmation pop up on the screen and exhaled, a sound of pure greed. That was the signal. The doors burst open. Federal agents and forensic accountants flooded the room. Sloane stood up, knocking her chair over, her face draining of color. She tried to stammer an excuse, but the agents already had the laptop. They had the IP addresses. They had the vendor list. "It wasn't me," she screamed, her composure shattering. It was Ethan. He made me do it simultaneously. Across the city at Stonebridge Memorial Hospital, Ethan was scrubbing in for a surgery that did not exist. He was preparing to bill the insurance company for a complex cardiac procedure on a patient who was actually dead. He turned from the sink, water dripping from his hands, to find 2 detectives and an insurance fraud investigator blocking the door. "Dr. Klein," the detective said, holding up a pair of handcuffs. "We need to talk about your billing practices." While they were being read their rights, I was sitting in the office of Marin Holt. I signed the final page of my countersuit. We filed the motion for an immediate freeze on all marital assets, attaching the thick file of evidence, the photos of the affair, the forged loan documents, the secret life insurance changes, and the audio recording of Ethan blackmailing me. The twist was brutal. Ethan had instructed his lawyers to file for emergency divorce that morning, thinking he could lock down half the estate before I got wise. But when the court clerk reviewed the filings, the reality hit. I had already moved my separate property into the trust. The house was leveraged to the hilt by the loans Ethan had taken out. The joint accounts were frozen due to the fraud investigation. Ethan was not splitting a fortune. He was splitting a mountain of debt that he had created with a forged pen. My phone rang an hour later. It was an unknown number. I answered, putting it on speaker so Marin could hear. "Why?" Ethan asked. His voice was broken, sounding small and terrified against the background noise of a police precinct. "I gave you a life. Why did you do this?" I looked out the window at the skyline of Harbor Ridge. Because you taught me how to live by lying. Ethan, I said, my voice cold and sharp as a scalpel. And I am a very fast learner. I hung up before he could respond. The fallout was spectacular. Sloan turned on Ethan immediately to cut a plea deal, handing over emails where he outlined the structure of the shell companies. Ethan tried to claim Sloan seduced him into the scheme, but my recordings proved he was the architect. They tore each other apart in the interrogation rooms, ensuring that neither would see freedom for a very long time. I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun. I did not cry. I did not laugh. I just took a deep breath, and for the first time in 12 years, my chest did not feel compressed by the weight of someone else's expectations. Victor stood by his car at the curb. He did not smile, but he gave me a slow, respectful nod. We did not hug. We did not plan a dinner. We were two soldiers who had survived the same war, and now we were going our separate ways. I did not need a new romance. I needed to be alone. I drove to the small brick building on the edge of the arts district. I unlocked the door to the office space I had leased that morning. I walked inside, the smell of fresh paint and possibility filling the air. I placed my keys on the empty desk and looked out at the city. The climax of my life was not watching them fall. It was this moment, right here, standing in the silence of my own making. "Hello, Maddox Studio," I whispered to the empty room. "Let's get to work. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from, so please leave a comment below, sharing your location and your thoughts on Claire's revenge. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to the Mia Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit the hype button to help this story reach even more listeners.